All the way back in 1987, the Showtime Lakers, spearheaded by Magic Johnson, scored 115.6 points every 100 possessions, a mark that would hold as the most efficient offense in league history all the way until 2019. Since the calendar turned to the year 2023, the NBA's average offense is scoring 116.6 points every 100 possessions, meaning that just 4 years ago, what would have been the best offensive team ever would actually be a whole point worse than just the most average offenses of today. NBA offenses have gotten so obscenely efficient that it's almost laughable to think about. And over the last decade or so, the entire landscape of the game has changed due to two key principles: the explosion of the three-point shot and the emphasis on off-ball movement. Back when the Lakers were running through the league, the paint was packed with finishers from one side and rim protectors from the other. But you look at how players are positioned on the floor today, and it's just way too much space to cover. Back then, all you really needed was one great paint defender to put together an elite team defense, and now it feels like having even just one weak link, or a big who isn't mobile enough to make up all that ground, is all it takes for opposing teams to just score at a relentless rate. The thing is though, as offenses continue to become more and more effective, it's a lot harder for players to actually move the needle and create separation from the pack. For example, the Philadelphia 76ers and Dallas Mavericks both currently rank as top 6 offenses. Now, does that mean if you took James Harden and paired him with Luka Doncic that they would catapult all the way to number 1? Well, not necessarily. More talent doesn't always mean more production due to the idea of diminishing returns. Because both players are ball-dominant playmakers who like to create in perimeter isolation or out of the high pick and roll, at a certain point the value of their skills becomes smaller, as there's only one ball and they can't both be doing what they do best at the same time. In order to continuously increase that ceiling without those diminishing returns being felt, you need guys who can just plug in next to anyone and maintain the value of their skill set. And with the recent boom in three-point shooting and off-ball movement, players that do both of those things have become a high-demand asset. The first squad to heavily lean into and weaponize these traits as the focal point of their offense was probably the Indiana Pacers back in the 1990s. Reggie Miller was a wizard without the ball and one of the best shooters ever, but had a limited game on the ball, so they built a system where he could run around screens, cut all over the court, and get a decent diet of shots off from all 3 levels without having to take on the heavy burden of a traditional shot creator. During that time, he built one of the most efficient scoring profiles ever, and Indiana's offenses were incredible in both the regular season and playoffs. That sort of laid the baseline for other players and teams to try out similar concepts. Ray Allen was basically a 2000s carbon copy. Rip Hamilton's sharp movement in the mid-range was a staple of Detroit, and a bit later on, you saw guys like JJ Redick and Kyle Korver come in to fly all over the court and hunt out triples. But it was Golden State and their motion offense that truly leaned into these principles in a way we've never seen. Remember, it was a sort of stigma back then that a quote jump shooting team didn't have what it took to win a title, and they just blew that right open. Their roster consisted of not one, but 2 of the greatest movement shooters we've ever seen, and the constant threat that they posed opened up so much offensive flexibility. They could initiate their sets in a ton of different ways. Split cuts out of the pinch post have been a go-to of theirs for years, where oftentimes the gravity of that off-ball shooter opens up wide open opportunities at the rim. This applies to virtually all screening actions. Letting either of those 2 free up for quality looks from outside is a sort of death sentence, and because their movement patterns were so perfect, extra defenders had to be brought into these actions, which led to tons of advantages. As a result, they could put lineups on the floor consisting of 1 or even 2 complete non-spacers and still end possessions with wide open layups against even the best defenses, because of how difficult this is to guard. A 40% three-point shot is worth 1.2 points per attempt, or an offensive rating of 120, on par with the league's best offenses, and some of these players can get up to 45 or even 50% on their open three-pointers, and they'll utilize so many different types of movement to free themselves for quality shots. Because they don't have the ball, there's no limit to their freedom and no worry about handling through traffic, so they can just run wherever, whenever they want. As Chris Paul gets into a pick and roll, Harden is focused on positioning himself where he could offer help if needed, so he's slow to react as Redick just sprints to the top of the key, and that's all it takes for a phenomenal look. Even when defenders are attached to their man and completely active, it's really hard to chase a guy who's basically in a full sprint all over the court while simultaneously navigating screens to stay with them every inch of the way. Especially now that staggered screens have become such a common wrinkle, and these movers are actively reading the defense to counter with quick cuts in any direction. There's an entire basketball encyclopedia's worth of set plays and designs to get these shooters open, but these actions can also be spontaneous and a bit jarring to defend. The emergence of the dribble handoff essentially enables weaker ball handlers to create the same sort of advantages you'd see in a classic pick and roll, and allows bigs who don't actually pose a threat as a shooter to serve as floor spacers. Even just the most basic off-ball screens can be a nightmare to defend, whether that's a pin down, a curl, a flare, or even a floppy. A lot of times you'll even see these shooters used as the screener, not only to free up for more quality looks of their own, but to create some confusion for defenders and cause breakdowns that result in high efficiency opportunities elsewhere. Going back to Steph Curry and the Warriors, he's the king of relocation, starting this play on the ball, driving into the paint for a kickout, and without breaking stride continues his pursuit all the way to the opposite corner, and the defense just had no idea. Here's another one where he has the ball in the painted area, kicks it out, and immediately darts to the corner where he can get it right back for a warm-up jumper. Depending on the shooter, some need just minimal space to comfortably knock down threes. The league is filled with masters of off-balance shot making, which becomes that much harder to guard when they're bigger, like 6'10" Michael Porter Jr. Sometimes it feels like defenses can do everything right, but just that minuscule window of opportunity and 3 more points are on the board. Klay Thompson comes off a pin down to the corner, where he catches the ball facing the exact opposite direction of the hoop, and in one motion he's perfectly squared at the top of his release, which just isn't fair. Here's the same sort of action, and OKC defends it perfectly, switching without giving up any slip to the basket, and getting a 7'5" wingspan to contest right in the face of Thompson, but it just doesn't matter. Because good three-point shooting is so conducive to efficient offense, as these guys move around the floor and hunt for these shots, opposing defenses have to do everything they can to not let them get open, and that threat they possess opens up other options. The most obvious one is a cut to the basket, typically by more agile athletes or better finishers of the bunch, but sometimes it's as simple as going through the motions as if looking to shoot off a screen and getting played so heavily for that option that the result is a wide open paint. Aggressive off-ball defense also opens up a ton of avenues for attacking after the catch. Driving lanes are a bit easier to come by and a bit more advantageous. Flybys and hard closeouts can lead to higher quality looks from deep, or quick 1-2 dribble pull-up jumpers in the mid-range. And the biggest one is the potential for extra passing. The first thing to worry about on this possession is Korver coming off this screen and flowing right into one of his 49% three-pointers. He counters with a backdoor cut that results in a catch under the basket that draws help from the corner, and the result is still a wide open three. Due to Korver's limitations as a ball handler, he's never going to be a player who you can ask to set up the offense, initiate actions, or make plays for others, but just those two skills, all-time three-point shooting and off-ball movement, allow him to connect the offense and play a huge part in the creation of great looks for the team around him. That's why with each complementary skill, the value of that movement shooting is multiplied. Being able to make the right play off the catch, whether that's an extra pass or a quick drive, makes defending the entire team that much more difficult. It's not just in the half court where they're lethal though, but before we get into that, I want to give a quick shout out to Basketball Index for helping with this analysis in the making of this video. If you're not familiar with the site, they provide tons of statistical measurements, tools, and easily accessible graphics to further guide your understanding of the sport. They classify players by role based on their skills and tendencies, and for the purpose of this video, I can look in great detail at the nuances of movement shooters and what makes them so valuable. By signing up with the code VENUE30, you can get 30% off your first month subscription, so I'll leave a link in the description below for anyone interested. These movement shooters are terrifying in the open floor, where teammates are actively looking to hit them streaking down the court for quick hitting threes that often lead to huge momentum swings. And with all of that fast-paced confusion, sometimes defenders will forget about the first rule of transition defense, staying in front of the ball. And this is a more subtle form of what I like to refer to as off-ball playmaking. Here's a more direct example of what I mean when I say that. All Steph does is run from the lane to the corner, and Iggy just faking the pass sends two defenders flying by, laying out a red carpet to the basket. These types of plays are pretty much exactly what I'm trying to encapsulate with the value of a great movement shooter. Those two skills just open up so many different offensive pathways, both for that individual and the other four players around him. And because they don't actually need the ball to maximize their value, they're pretty much the ultimate needle mover in today's game, which has placed a huge emphasis on creating space to attack, which is why every NBA team looking to compete needs this type of player. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and turn my post notifications on to be first on more content. If you're interested in my more in-depth research, make sure to check out my website and social media profiles. You can find those links in the description. Feel free to let me know down in the comments what you think of movement shooters and just how valuable you believe they are. As always, I hope you all have a great day, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.